Agenda for today. Okay, colleagues, this is the agenda for today. It's opening and welcome and apologies. And then we take a briefing from the Office of the Auditor-General of South Africa on the DOD, DMV, Armscor, and the CCB. They were looking at the findings and audit outcomes on the financial and non-financial performance of the departments and the two entities reporting to the department for the year 21-22. So essentially that is the main item for the meeting today. And then we consider and adopt our minutes and then close the meeting. So this is the last meeting of the term. We have not received the guidelines for the fourth term as yet. I will then put forward a draft program for the new term. But I would request that we only focus on the first 3 meetings of the term and then leave the rest until we come back in the fourth term. The reason why I want us to focus on the first 3 meetings of the fourth term is so that the department can start preparing for the first, the second, and the third meeting for term 4, for the fourth term. That's what I would propose. Consistent with that, I would invite Brian to flight the draft program for the term, for the fourth term, so that we look at those matters that I want us to lift up and tackle in the first, second, and third week of the term. But before Brian, as Brian does that, let me welcome all of you to the meeting. And then let me check who is in the meeting. I hope I will be able to do that. I can see that the DM is in the meeting. And I don't see the minister as yet. Let me welcome the Deputy Minister. Good morning, Deputy Minister, and welcome.
Honorable Chair and honorable members, good morning.
Good morning, sir. The SecDef office, I can see is in the meeting. Maybe he will then give us apologies if there are any from the side of the department. SecDef, good morning and welcome.
There we go. Good morning, Chair. I am here in the meeting. I am with the acting CFO and also Dr. Gamete. We are supposed to be joined by CNOC as well as CHR. They are making their way here. And probably, Chair, whilst we are on it, they are going to load shed us any moment now. We'll try to reconnect just in the instance you lose us. We'll try to reconnect. We'll be load shedded from 10 to 12:30.
Okay. All right. Okay. No, thanks, Steph. We will note that. So I welcome you. I welcome the team that is accompanying you as well. Colleagues, let me also welcome the Office of the Auditor-General that will be doing the presentation today. Lawrence, let me just check if you, I did not see your name, but I suppose you are.
I'm here, Chairperson.
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. It's Lawrence van Vuren. Please, I welcome you, sir, and you may introduce your team and give us apologies if there are any.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning once again, Honourable Chairperson and members, and everyone else in attendance. I do have today with me our Head of Portfolio, Mr. Tamsanga Zigode. I also have Mr. Edward Kutsia, Mr. Solomon Gianni, the Senior Manager responsible for this audit, as well as Mr. Diema Leroux from our Performance Audit section, and Ms. Uviwe Luxana Plaiki, who's responsible for the DMV audit. Mr. Kutsia is responsible for the Armscor audit. So I will, whenever they have to speak, they will introduce themselves. Chairperson, Ms. Totsetsi is not available today, but I'll be handling the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, no, thank you so much. Do we have anyone from the DMV in the meeting? Anyone from the DMV? Well, I was not expecting them, but I'm saying if they're in the meeting, it's proper that.
Good morning.
Yes.
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning.
My name is Irene Bolweni, Director General DMV. Good morning to the Deputy Minister as well, and to the team from AG. Yes, indeed, we are in the meeting.
Okay. Thank you very much, DG. And I welcome. Are there any apologies you want to convey on your side?
From our side, it would be only Mr. Siango who's on leave.
Okay. No, thank you so much. All right. Colleagues, that is the attendance. I thought I should announce all the colleagues that are on the platform who are going to be the recipients of the information that the AG will be presenting today. But just before I invite the AG to do the presentation, may I invite Brian to flight the draft program for the new term?
Just before that, Chair, I see we also have Minister in the meeting, Chair.
Oh, okay. And we also have Armscor. And
that is correct.
And we also have CCB.
That is correct, Chair.
Okay. All right. Armscor, I don't know who's in the meeting from Armscor.
Good morning, Honorable Chair. My name is Solomon Zimbada, COO. I'm joined by our CFO and his staff, as well as the executive responsible for supply chain. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Advocate, welcome. Word of welcome to you and the team that is in the meeting to support you. And CCB, Mr. Gilfillan.
Good morning, Honorable Tech Kaba. Long time no see. When I'm joined here by Mr. Mandange with the CFO. I don't see the chair here, but I'm sure we will have at least the people from our audit committee in the meeting. There are so many names in front of me, Chair. I unfortunately can't see who is here and who's not here. But thank you so much for the invite and good meeting.
Again, you are yourself and the team in the meeting to assist you. You are all welcome. Now, I think I'm done with that. Let me welcome the Honorable Minister. I did not say the name. I did not say the name. Sorry for the omission. Honorable Minister, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Chair. I struggled to log on. That is why you didn't see me probably when you started. But thanks a lot. We are in your hands, and hopefully we will not stress you too much in this meeting.
No.
Thank you.
Sure, thanks. No, thank you very much, Minister. We are not expecting the responses to the AG's report as yet. We would want to give you, the department and the entities, time to reflect on the AG's presentation and then come back and give us their side of the story. Let me invite so that we all see what we would have lined up for the new term. May I invite Brian to flag the draft?
Is it visible, Chair?
Yes, it is visible. So, Minister, in the opening, I said that this is the draft. We have not received the guidelines for the fourth term as yet, and that considering this being the last meeting, we thought we should at least agree on the items for the first 3 meetings of the new term, and so that the department can start, preparing for those first 3 meetings of the term. Right, but only if the colleagues in the meeting agree with this proposal. All right. We hope that the first meeting will be on the 12th of October. Okay. In other words, we come back on in that week. If we come back in that week, then our first meeting will be on the 12th of October. And we also work on the program for the fourth term being an 8-week program. It may be 7 week, 8, but roughly an 8-week what you call term. Now, what we are presenting proposing for the first 3 meetings. One, I will present the term, the fourth term program for adoption. I will then invite Armscor to brief us on the 21-22 annual report and the entities' responses to the AG's audit outcomes. We'll also take the advantage of the fact that Armscor will be in the meeting on the day to ask them to brief us on the outcomes of engagements with Denel and let me say DOD, let's not say SNDF, and DOD on a final decision on project Ufyester and the way forward. So those are the 2 items would request Armscor to brief us on the day. And thereafter, we'll invite the DOD to take us through their 2021-2022 annual report and their responses to the AGs of South Africa's audit outcomes. And we are also taking advantage that they will be in the meeting to request that they brief us on the spending. There was this special allocation that was that we received from Treasury 225 million rand for border technology. So, and then we deal with our minutes. So that's the first day. And then the second day, that's the second meeting, the CCB will brief us on their 21-22 annual report and their responses, if there are any. They received a clean audit. Congratulations, I think for the second time or third time. Responses to the AG of South Africa's audit outcomes. And another briefing from DMV, 2021-2022 annual report and their responses to the AG of South Africa's audit outcomes. And again, the DMV will be in the meeting so that we don't call them back to again until later. We'll request them to brief us on the intervention to remedy the underperformance and expenditure. The serious underperformance in the DMV and serious underperformance and the resultant under expenditure. So we'll be dealing with that on the second day, and then we look at the minutes. And then the third day, we'll then meet to adopt the BRR report. So, which will be informed by the discussions up to the 19th of October. But we want to bring in the issue of fleet policy. There's an issue that has been coming up on Wednesday, maybe before the consideration of the BRR recommendation. So we'll bring that one in on the day. But just go down so that they get a sense of what things may look like. But this is very draft. Just, okay, don't go too far, okay? So this is the things. Briefing by the Surgeon General, in other words, by SAMS, on the functionality of the military health centers. They were looking at the 3 hospitals and the health centers in the various bases. There was this issue of the Umzimvubu, and we deal with the minutes and then. So I'm not presenting what then comes after these 3 meetings. I'm just throwing it, but I'm drawing the attention only to the first 3 meetings. I'm presenting this so that the colleagues have a sense of the things that may come up, okay? The last meeting on the 30th of November, I think are matters that were to have been dealt with DMV last week, which we deferred due to late submission of their presentation. Is that the last meeting, Brian? Go right down. Is that the last?
That is correct. That is correct. It's the last meeting.
Okay. So, but go back to the first 3 meetings, which I'm presenting today, colleagues. I'm presenting these 3 meetings. Over to you, colleagues.
Chairperson, if I may.
Yes, Mr. Murray.
Chairperson, there are obviously a lot of other issues I think that we have identified as we went along over this quarter and even this year. So there's a number of other issues that we can bring in. However, I think in terms of our obligation towards the considering of the annual reports and obviously the MTF that is coming up and the BRR reports that we have to do, I think we have got no other option but to follow as suggested. Obviously further on, we can obviously add later on There are other things that I can already see that we have to add there. But I think in terms of the first three, only from a statutory responsibility and a legislative responsibility, I think we've got no option but to focus on those three things. So I will support that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Murray. Mr. Motley?
Thank you very much. This thing doesn't want to unmute, but I managed. Thank you very much and good morning to everyone on the platform. Yeah, Chair, because you just highlighted, I just want to put it in detail so that the department is aware what exactly to prepare for that presentation on the 26th. It's around their fleet management policy, how they manage their fleet, and essential contracts such as fuel supplies, which will talk to how they manage their fleet, so forth and so on. And I think we can just expand because we've got two items on that day to just make it for them to brief us on their essential services contract that will cover fuel supply, will cover nutritional food supply to soldiers and so forth. I think that's what I would wanted to express and agree with the first 3 days items.
All right. Colleagues, any other agreed? Is there no objection to this amended 3-day program?
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you so much. Agreed. Thank you so much. All right, so we'll amend it accordingly and then send it to the department. Now, having dealt with that, my apologies, Mr. Van Vuren. I now invite you to take us through the briefings. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Chairperson, and good morning, Honourable Minister and Honourable Deputy Minister. Chairperson, we could not get confirmation that DMV has tabled yet. So maybe if we can then just check if they've tabled, and if not, then we can go ahead with the permission of Chairperson too, because the outcomes is included in this presentation.
Let's get that. Deputy Minister, or let me say Minister, because he's the one who does tabling in Parliament.
Yes, Chairperson, I can't remember the date, but I definitely know that we kept within the time to sign off and send to Parliament. I would have to check with the DG whether she knows the specific date.
The DMV Minister, because let me just check. Brian, what is your the latest status on this from the table of Parliament?
Chair, from the table, we have not received anything, Chair. There has not been a tabling.
There's not been a tabling. But we have received all the other 3, except DMV.
That is correct, sir.
Okay. That is a status. That is a status, Minister, from the side of Parliament. Yes. Who's calling me?
It's me, SecDef Chair. I just wanted to say that we tabled on the 9th of September.
No. All other 3 have tabled, SecDef,
okay.
OD, Armscor, and CCB. Right now, we're confirming if we have received the confirmation of the DMV tabling, DMV report tabling. Brian has just confirmed that as of yesterday, we still had not received a confirmation that the report of the DMV has been tabled. Because if it is in that, then it causes some challenges because we can't deal with it until it has been tabled.
Chair, I'll get back to you before the end of this meeting, just to follow up on what has gone on.
And now, because we're in the meeting, Minister, to deal with it, maybe let's say, I don't know what is the position now. The idea, Minister, is that we take presentations after the reports have been tabled. We want to, we respect a protocol. We don't preempt the tabling, because the tabling means the meeting is now, or the report is public, can be transacted upon by the public. It's for the public consumption. And maybe you can say, Minister, clear us that please deal with it. You give us permission to deal with it. Even if it has not been tabled officially. Minister?
Chair, I was asking for 5 minutes just to speak to the DG to find out what has gone on, come back to you, and then we can proceed.
Okay, no, thank you so much. All right, so Mr. Van Vuren, let's deal with the first 3, and until we will then deal with the 4th one when we know what the status of the report is, insofar as it being made public. Over to you, Mr. Van Vuren.
May I,
Minister?
Chair,
Yes, Minister.
I was trying to get proof that we tabled, because I am told that at least by Monday we're following up with the tabling in Parliament. So I'm asking for proof. If we can, that proof that indeed Parliament signed off, it says it has gotten it. But I do know that we processed everything and it went through. So as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing that bars us, because I am very clear that we followed up. So I think we should not shortchange the committee and preempt a discussion here.
Okay. No, in that way, let's take your word, Minister. Van Vuren, you'll brief us on all 4. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. If my colleagues can just put for us the slideshow on the screen. Chairperson, while we're doing that, we will be providing a link to the committee either today or during the rest of the week for the committee, also just to give us some feedback based on the presentation that we are doing today. I'll be switching off my camera now just to make the presentation a bit easier. The Auditor-General exists as a constitutional institution to strengthen this country's democracy and enabling oversight and accountability and good governance through the auditing work that we do, and thereby building public confidence. One of the initiatives that we have to assist the committee in its oversight function is to provide feedback on the audit outcomes. And we call it insights, and we trust that these insights will assist the committee in executing its mandate. I would like to spend some time on the next slide, which deals with the accountability ecosystem. This is something that may be fairly new, and I would like us to spend some time on it. It is important that we first reflect on the accountability ecosystem and understand the roles and responsibilities of each and every individual in that system. Because ultimately, we believe that if we can get all the role players in this accountability ecosystem to play their role the way it should, then the culture will change in public sector, and ultimately the audit outcomes will change. So the accountability network or accountability ecosystem is a network of stakeholders that have all a mandate or a responsibility, whether legislative or moral, to drive and insist on the public sector accountability. A more active and engaged accountability ecosystem would add to the much needed effort to shift the public sector culture and to alleviate overall reliance on the work of the Auditor-General. Shifting public sector culture towards one is characterized by performance, accountability, transparency, and integrity. So if this accountability ecosystem functions the way it should, then the audit outcomes should change, and that should ultimately change the lives of our citizens. So if we can look at the various role players in this accountability ecosystem, it starts off on the left-hand side with the officials, each of them executing their daily task diligently and making sure that they comply with the laws and regulations and that they execute the internal controls effectively. And then there's senior management. Senior management responsibilities is to ensure that there's proper budgeting and performance management, to focus on infrastructure programs if there are, to ensure that there's proper record keeping on a daily and monthly basis, to make sure that the necessary controls are in place, and to make sure that regular and accurate financial and performance reports are compiled, and that there's always compliance with laws and regulations. Then we have the accounting officer or accounting authorities, and their responsibility is to creating an environment that improve performance and make sure that there are adequate controls and, very important, adequate consequence management. They should ensure that the plans are actually implemented. They should ensure that internal and external audit findings are addressed. They should ensure that there's also consequence management for any transgressions. And they must create a culture of accountability for officials who fail to comply with applicable legislation. Then we have the internal audit section. The internal audit section is very important. It is there in terms of legislation. The internal audit focuses on the control environment. It determines whether the internal controls are effective or not, gives feedback to management to enable management and the accounting officer to take the necessary steps to improve the control environment. Good internal controls, and especially preventative controls, would ultimately result in positive audit outcomes. Then there's the audit committee, which is also a legislative committee. And the audit committee is first of all there to ensure that internal audit functions properly, and then also to advise the accounting officer on any risks in the environment and on any actions that the accounting officer should take. Again, this should all assist in ensuring a positive audit outcome. Then there is the executive authority, in this case, the Minister of Defence. Executive authorities' responsibility is that they should be familiarize themselves with the performance that is expected of the accounting officers and accounting authorities. They must make sure that the performance is properly managed and that accounting officers and accounting authorities take the appropriate actions and the right decisions, and also that there's consequence management for any transgressions. They should ensure that accounting officers and accounting authorities implement the recommendations of internal audit and of the Auditor-General and of the audit committees. And they should monitor the progress and support the accounting officer and accounting authorities in cases where there is material irregularities that have been identified and reported by the Auditor-General. Then we have the National Executive Leadership, and then we have coordinating departments, National Treasury, Public Service, and Administration, Planning, and Monitoring. They have various legislative roles to fulfill, some of them from a monitoring point of view. and others from an administrative point of view. Then we have the portfolio committee and the public accounts committees. And the portfolio committees are required to assess the strategic and annual performance plans of departments and public entities to make sure that they effectively fulfill their responsibilities. They also exercise oversight over the whole portfolios and also then specifically in terms of the audit outcomes in compliance with laws and regulations. And you can also make recommendations for improvement in systems. We've got in the middle, we've got the Auditor-General, and our objective is to provide insights to all these role players, including the active citizens of the country. And we want to influence our stakeholders to move from mere awareness of our messages to active action. And then lastly, the Auditor-General has also got a mandate to enforce, and that is in terms of the material irregularity process. So, Chairperson, if all of these role players effectively execute their responsibilities, there should be an improvement in financial management that would enhance the lives of our citizens, and because the money will be spent correctly, there will be performance in terms of performance objectives and targets. And you will see as we go through the presentation, we're going to specifically deal today with the performance information, and we're going to provide you with some information on the actual performance of the entities that would assist the committee to also reflect on whether the entities performed in the manner that it was planned. On the next slide, we're looking at the audit outcomes, and it is for the over the administrative term. And we will note that there was initially an improvement. It is the Castle Control Board that moved from a qualified opinion with findings to a clean audit, and they've actually maintained that clean audit for 3 years. However, the Department of Military Veterans and the Armscor, they stagnated at unqualified with findings, and the Department of Defense was also qualified with findings over the last 4 years. In this portfolio, Chairperson, there is no outstanding audits at this point in time. I would now like to focus on performance planning and reporting and the impact that it has on service delivery. So when we received the performance reports of the various entities and we audited them, you will note that the quality of from what we received until when we expressed the audit opinion remained the same. In other words, in the case of DOD and DMV, they were not able to make adjustments throughout the audit process to get a positive outcome in terms of the performance information. I would like to specifically highlight that with the Department of Military Veterans, there's 2 key areas that needs to be addressed when it comes to performance information. And the first one is that the DMV does not have a specific information system that is implemented to assist it in managing performance information and keeping that information in a reliable format to assist them in managing the performance information. And that is actually a requirement of the public service regulations. Then secondly, the Department of Military Veterans also does not have a procedure to facilitate effective performance monitoring and specifically quarterly reporting. And quarterly reporting is very important because it is through that quarterly reporting that an entity would verify its performance information, would note that there's underperformance and would be able to take appropriate action. Now that procedures and that quarterly reporting is a requirement in terms of the Treasury regulations. On the right-hand side of the slide, we've summarized the findings that we have on performance reporting. For the Department of Defense, it is on program 2 that we focused. The program is called Forced Employment. Now, in this program, there are some targets that are classified, and this specific finding relates to one of those classified indicators. So we do not provide any detail on it, but the important part that we want to communicate is that we were not able to get supporting evidence for all the achievements. So in other words, not all the achievements were supported by sufficient appropriate audit evidence. When it comes to the Department of Military Veterans, we also audited their program to socioeconomic support. And there we have a number of findings. The first findings relates to supporting evidence for some of the indicators materially differed from what was actually reported as an achievement. So what this means is that there's an achievement reported, and the information that was provided to us does not relate to that, let's say, specific number that has been reported. So in other words, we differ from the information that has actually been reported by the DMV in those specific indicators. And those specific indicators relates to the number of people that were approved from the non-statutory forces for verification and inclusion on the database, number of military veterans provided with newly built houses, and number of bursaries provided to military veterans and their dependents. So it's important that when the committee reflects on this performance, that you keep in mind that the numbers that are reported there for those specific indicators are not verified. The planned target, as per the approved annual performance plan, and the performance against the planned targets were not reported in the annual report for the following indicators. And that is military veterans participating in subsidized transport benefit pilot project, and the number of bursaries provided to military veterans and their dependents. Then for various indicators, the variance were not explained. Now, it is important, and it's a requirement that the variances between the planned and actual achievement should be explained for the user also to understand what is the reasons. And then lastly, the planned indicator for the target of military veterans participating in the pension benefit pilot project was not reported as required. What was actually reported was just that there's a policy that in draft. So the actual achievement did not relate to the target that was set for a number of military veterans. If we look at the impact of this performance findings on performance information, and it also relates to when we talk about the achievements. If we look at the impact, then there's a possibility that in the case of the Department of Defense that the capabilities may not be available to support the SANDF in terms of its operational requirements, because that information is not accurate. And in the case of the DMV, it actually results in delayed service delivery to military veterans. On the next slide, we highlight for the committee what is the actual key targets in terms of the MTSF for the defense portfolio, social cohesion, effectively defend South Africa's borders, protect and safeguard and secure, and then also compliance with external peace missions. What we've done on the left-hand side of the slide with the bars is we've taken all the performance targets of the various entities, and we've purely looked at it in terms of the information as it is published in the annual report. So you will recall, Chairperson, that we only audit certain programs. So this information is taken from the information as published by the entities in totality. So we might not have audited all these programs, so we purely make an analysis based on the information that is published. And we will note that in the case of DOD, 40% of the targets were not achieved, and in DMV, 58% of the targets were not achieved. If we look at the key targets that were not achieved for the DOD, it is the planned joint interdepartmental agency and multinational military exercises, percentage compliance with joint force employment requirements. That's also a classified indicator, percentage of combat ready capabilities, and percentage of the value of reimbursements by the UN recognized. And you will see that in the next slide, there's information on that. For the DMV, the key indicators that were not achieved is again the number of approved statutory forces received from the verification panel for inclusion on the database, number of military veterans provided with newly built houses, number of military veterans participating in the pension benefit pilot project, and number of military veterans with access to healthcare services. Again, the impact of this is that in the case of DOD, that there might not be the necessary available support to the SANDF for its operational requirements. And in the case of DMV, there's delayed service delivery to the military veterans. That is the impact of not achieving all the necessary objectives. We highlight the key priorities in terms of the MTSF 40 committee to also enable the committee to reflect on the future as well in terms of the annual performance plans, whether there's any changes that needs to be made to those annual performance plans to be able to ensure that the necessary key targets are achieved, and whether there should be any change in focus. The next two slides then just gives a bit more information on these key targets that we've discussed. This is information that we've just taken like this from the annual reports, and I'm not going to go through it in detail. We've included it in the presentation for the committee to be able to just reflect on it, and to have it close by for you to take further action where needed, because we also know that you might not always have this information in terms of the annual performance reports that are made available. Chairperson, during the audit process, we also focused on some value-added initiatives. And we focused on one area in the Department of Defense and one area in the Department of Military Veterans. For the Department of Defense, we focused on Project Tusano, and we focused on this project to be able to determine whether the arrangement that the department have with the Cuban supplier actually is economically and efficient and effective. We've given you some statistics there that the expenditure on this project, and this is mainly for the repair of the vehicles and also for some professional training, that the cost of this project since 2014 is about 1.2 billion rands. That is what was paid to the supplier. And if you look at the total cost of the project, it's about 1.5 billion. The 300 million difference, that is the expenditure relating to, for instance, the accommodation and other expenses toward the personnel from the company that is based in South Africa that is involved in repair of the vehicles. Our other observations, Chairperson, first of all, I must highlight that we did have a limitation of scope as all the information was not provided to us as we requested. We were also unable to visit.
Sorry. There was a time when I lost you. I don't know if that happened on this side only, because you were making a point that there is the cost since 2014 is 1.2 billion rand.
Yeah.
And the expenditure relating to accommodation and other expenses is about 300 million rand, bringing the total to 1.5. Can you continue from there?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Chairperson, our overall observations in terms of this project, I will highlight now, but I first just have to indicate to the committee that we had limitations when we were auditing this project, in that all the information was not provided to us, and we were also not granted access to some of the production centers of workshops for us to actually determine how things work in those workshops. So from the information that we could get, we have the following observations. Firstly, that the agreements that were signed, supplementary agreements that were signed, were open-ended. So the umbrella agreement allows for supplementary agreements, and then what the department did is every time they just entered into a supplementary agreement for any services that they wanted. Now, this process was not fair, equitable, and transparent because it did not give other players in the market an opportunity to participate in these projects. And therefore, the whole expenditure towards Project Tusano is regarded as irregular expenditure and also disclosed as such in the financial statement, because it doesn't meet the requirements of Section 217 of the Constitution, that all procurement must be fair, equitable, transparent, and cost-effective. From the analysis that we could do, Chairperson, and once again I emphasize that we were not provided with all the information that we requested, but from the information that we were provided with, our analysis shows that the DoD paid 3.8 times more per hour than the industry norm for the cost of repairing the vehicles. And this translates into an additional cost of about 240 million rands if we take it in terms of the hours over the duration of this project. Then also, if we focus on the training, specifically the training that happened outside of the country, we also noted that it cost additionally between 86 and 162% more for individuals to be trained rather than if they would have been trained in South Africa, and that relates to an additional expenditure of about 16 million rands. The impact is Chairperson, that the procurement of the service were not done in an economical way if we compare it to the other industries in South Africa. To a certain extent, skilled South Africans were denied the opportunity to be employed in this sector. And if we have to estimate, then most probably an additional 15 mechanical engineers and 33 mid-level technicians could have been employed. South Africans could have been employed. Our observation of what caused this is that we couldn't find any evidence that there was a proper need assessment done by the department to make a proper cost analysis, whether it would be more economic to actually procure these services from other suppliers within South Africa, rather than to do it through Project Tusano. Our recommendations to the accounting officers to take effective and appropriate steps to prevent future irregular expenditure, reassess the agreement for this services and examine other alternatives for these services which would be more cost effective and which would comply with the requirements of Section 217 of the Constitution. The area that we focused on in the Department of Military Veterans, I'm now on slide 11, is the assessment of the compliance with the department with the Military Veterans Act, and more specifically in relation to the database of military veterans and military veteran affairs. Our overall observations are that the department took longer than 12 months to register individuals onto the database. In some instances, benefits were paid to persons who were not confirmed to be registered on the National Military Veterans Database. And in some cases, we could not trace the individuals or persons who received the benefits to the Military Veteran Database. The department is busy with data cleansing and rechecking the database to ensure that all persons are eligible. But during the audit, we could not confirm the number of military veterans that were added to the database as reported by the department. The impact of this is that due to the lengthy registration process, individuals who qualify for the benefits may not have direct access to the benefits. And without maintaining an accurate and complete database, benefits may be provided to people who are not eligible to receive these benefits. The cause of this situation is a lack of adequate review and monitoring controls over the compliance with the military veteran regulations to ensure that the military veterans and dependents are registered on the database and also timeously, and delays in the process in ensuring that the department has a credible military veteran database. So the business of the Department of Military Veterans is dependent on a very accurate and complete database of military veterans, because it is that database that will always be used to determine if someone is a military veteran and to determine whether they are entitled to any of the benefits, and there's a variety of benefits, and therefore it's very important to first of all make sure that everyone that qualifies is on the database, to make sure that no one is left out from the benefits, but secondly also that there are no people on the database that shouldn't be there, which will then basically result in people accessing benefits which are not entitled to it. Our recommendation to the accounting officer is that the accounting officer should put validation checks in place to confirm that only military veterans are registered on this database, and that the process for validating information on the military veterans database should be expedited. I will now focus on material irregularities, and we're going to move to slide 13. So, Chairperson, we phased in the various entities into the material irregularity process over a number of years. For this year, the Department of Defense, Military Veterans and Armscor were included, and they were actually included for a number of years already. And then for the new financial year, the 2022-23 financial year, we will then also bring the Castle Control Board in under the entities that will be subject to the Public Audit Act, and that will then basically mean that the whole portfolio of the department Department of Military Veterans will then be included. Chairperson, I will focus now on the definition of a material irregularity, and I would read it word for word, because it's a very, very important definition, and it's got very important areas that one should focus on. A material irregularity is any non-compliance with or contravention of legislation. So that's one of the requirements. But then secondly, also any fraud, theft, or breach of fiduciary duty identified during an audit under the Public Audit Act that resulted or is likely to result in a financial loss. So it's very important that we do not necessarily have to wait for the financial loss to occur before we can issue material irregularity, once we see that there are circumstances that may result in a material financial loss, we can already at that point in time classify it as a material irregularity. Furthermore, it also relates to anything that relates to the misuse or loss of a material public resource or substantial harm to the public sector institution or the general to the public in general. When there's a material irregularity, there is a few important aspects to take note of, and that is, first of all, if an accounting officer or accounting authority actually follows the PFMA and comply with the PFMA, and specifically those provisions that requires compliance with legislation, requires that business must be done in an economical way, requires that there should be controls in place, required that there should be action taken in the event of losses or irregular expenditure or fruitless and wasteful expenditure. If an accounting officer or accounting authority complies with those requirements, there will actually be no need for the Auditor-General to even consider issue a material irregularity notification. However, it is when the accounting officers do not act that we then have to implement the material irregularity process. And what we can do is the Auditor-General can either deal self with a material irregularity, or it can be referred to another public body for further investigation. In that case, it will be done in terms of the mandate of that public body. Or in cases where appropriate action is not taken by an accounting officer or accounting authority, there's recommendations that the Auditor-General will make, and that will be published in the audit report. And if that is not executed, then the Auditor-General can also issue remedial action, which is then legally binding. And if the accounting officer still does not address the material irregularity, it can then ultimately result in issue of a certificate of debt. Slide 14 describes this process in a bit more detail, and I will explain it in a bit shorter way. So again, if we identify material irregularity, the Auditor-General can either deal with it, inform the accounting authority or accounting officer, and then they need to take appropriate action to prevent any future losses from happening, recover any financial losses, take disciplinary action, and in that way resolve the material irregularity. But if that is not done, then the Auditor-General will go on to the next phases, which will then be the recommendations or the remedial action if action is not taken, or then later on a certificate of debt. And there's certain processes that to be followed before certificate of debt is issued, and amongst others, the accounting officer or accounting authority will have a opportunity to also make written representations at that point in time. In the case where the Auditor-General decide to refer a irregularity to a public body for investigation, that public body then execute that investigation in terms of its mandate, and we will provide the information to the public body, and then we will just monitor the progress of the investigation of the public body and follow up whether any recommendations that the public body made was actually implemented. The role of the executive authority in oversight in all these processes are basically the same in that the executive authority should monitor the progress and supports the accounting officer in addressing the material irregularities, and very important also in improving controls. And then oversight should monitor the progress and call the accounting officer to account for actions taken and the outcomes. The difference is in the case where a material irregularity is referred to a public body for investigation. In that case, it is important for the executive authority and for oversight to actually ensure that there's progress with the investigations from the other public body and to call that public body to account in the case of oversight, for any undue delays in those investigations. On slide 15, we then summarize the material irregularities in this portfolio. There's 5 material irregularities, and all 5 of them relate to the Department of Defence. The first one deals with asset and inventory management. And the status of that material irregularity is that appropriate action was not taken, and then the Auditor-General issued remedial action in 2021, which has not yet been implemented. The accounting officer, the chief of the SANDF, did not implement the remedial actions and consequence management for both civilian and military command officials. The next one deals with the lease payments that were made for unoccupied buildings. Again, appropriate action were not taken, and then the Auditor-General issued recommendations in 2021, which were not implemented. In this case, there was a board of inquiry instituted by the Department of Defence, but there was, however, a need to institute a second board of inquiry, which was convened in December 2021. This board of inquiry acknowledged that there was a financial loss, but concluded that no officials should be held accountable for the irregularity. So we assessed the outcome of the board, or the Auditor-General assessed the outcome of that board of inquiry and concluded that the conclusion was not appropriate, and therefore the appropriate actions was not taken in terms of the recommendations that the Auditor-General made. The third one is the one about the unfair award of the fuel supply. This one was referred to the Directorate for Priority Crime Investigations in 15 November 2021. It's currently being investigated by them. The fourth one deals with the PPE, where PPE were not procured in a cost-effective manner. Again, appropriate action is not taken. There is a board of inquiry which was convened in August 2021. The board of inquiry also had to be reconvened due to shortcomings identified. And at the date of this report, the new board of inquiry has not been convened, and we concluded that appropriate action has not been taken to address the MI. The first one deals with the importation of the unregistered truck, the Hebron. Again, appropriate action was not taken. There was a material task team that investigated the procurement of this Hebron truck and concluded and made certain recommendations, including that disciplinary action should be taken. At the instruction of the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority, the department subsequently repatriated all the drugs back to Cuba. However, the 33.5 million rand that was paid has not yet been recovered. And therefore, we also concluded that appropriate actions were not taken for the specific material irregularity. On page 17, we have some overall observations. The first is that for the material irregularity with regard to the asset and inventory management project and the Hebron, there were actually some financial losses prevented in that for the asset and inventory management project. The department did not spend the full amount allocated to the service providers. There was 250 million rands not spent, and in the case of the Hebron, 226.85 million rands of the total contract value were not paid to the service provider. and therefore that results actually in no need to recover the additional money. It's only the 3 million rand that is still there. There was even no recoveries made for any losses relating to the lease payments of 108 million rands. Very importantly is that completing the disciplinary process against officials in the department were delayed, as we've indicated in the previous slides. In terms of the Defence Act, the Secretary of Defence does not have authority to take appropriate steps to institute disciplinary action against military command officials. However, the accounting officer did also not take any action against officials that are under her direct control and supervision. And the Chief of the SANDF has also not taken any action against military command members. Because of the current structure of the Department of Defence and its accountability framework and the current implementation of the PFMA and the provisions of the Defence Act, the Auditor-General had to carefully reconsider the next course of action regarding these MIs. The Chairperson, we will, in due course, request a special meeting with the committee to discuss this matter further. Our recommendations to the Portfolio Committee is that the Portfolio Committee should continue to actively engage with all the key role players responsible in resolving these material irregularities. The Portfolio Committee should request these role players to provide a plan of action with specific timeframes for implementing consequence management and recovering of losses. And then lastly, that the committee should obtain an assessment of the department's current accountability framework to understand the challenges and possibly provide guidance. And we have included this recommendation because we have reported that in the case of the Department of Defence, the supply chain management is not currently under the control of the Office of the CFO, and that is actually a requirement of the Treasury regulations. So there is some action that can be taken to get better control over procurement for the future and to be in compliance with the requirements of the Treasury regulations. Chairperson, then we go on to slide 19. We are now focusing on the financial part of the audit, and very important to note is that if we look at the financial statements that was presented for audit and the ones that we expressed an opinion on in the end of the day, it was possible for DMV and Armscor to correct any financial transactions that we found to be material, and therefore they were able to get unqualified opinions on their financial statements. On the left-hand side, there's just an indication of which are the controls that are not always in place, and it is mainly relating to record keeping, daily and monthly controls, in-year reporting, and very importantly, review and monitoring of compliance. The Department of Defence, as we've indicated earlier on, is qualified. It's qualified on a number of areas. The first area is the inherent scope limitation on goods and services and investments, and this relates to the COVID environment, and it is because we do not have access to all the information due to the nature of that environment. Secondly, we have again qualified on the completeness of irregular expenditure, and it's important just to note also that when we discuss irregular expenditure a bit later on, that so the figures that is currently reported for the Department of Defence on irregular expenditure is not complete. Then there's also qualification on movable tangible capital assets, which is not accurately and completely recorded. And then there was a qualification last year on employee benefits, and that employee benefits opening balances have not been corrected, so they are still, that balance is still overstated. If we look at the impact, the full extent of irregular expenditure is not known. It is very important that the control environment should be strengthened to ensure full compliance with legislation. There could be misappropriation of assets due to a lack of proper record keeping and monitoring. Leave transactions are captured late, resulting in incorrect leave payouts and misuse of leave. And there are inadequate controls and quality assurance processes around financial reporting that actually results in those material financial misstatements that then had to be corrected. So it's very important that the preventative controls are put in place to ensure that the financial statements are accurate and complete, and to ensure that there are credible financial information available at all times to make the correct management decisions on, and that it's not just after the audit only that financial statements are accurate and complete. On slide 20, we focus on financial health, and I would just like to emphasize a few matters here. I think the first one is in the middle green block, 11.3 million rand fruitless and wasteful expenditure in the Department of Defence. Creditors payments of 109 days for DMV, and then creditors greater than available cash at year end for DMV and DOD. Now, Chairperson, if we focus on the right hand side, the red block, if departments are still currently accounting for on the cash basis of accounting, but there is a requirement that they do have a disclosure note on accruals. That means that bring in the expenses at year end for which goods have been received, but which have not yet been paid, because on the cash basis of accounting, you only account for something once you've received for it and paid for it. But the budget process works like that an entity has provided the budget for a specific year. So the ideal situation would be spend your budget in that specific year. In the case of DMV and the DOD, if one would also add those accruals to the expenses, then these two entities would actually exceed their budget by 50%. And that also means that they will have to use a significant part of the next year's budget to actually pay the previous year's expenditure. And that puts the departments under significant financial strain, especially if you in earlier years had surpluses which was surrendered. We note also on the left-hand side of the slide that the Department of Defence is still under budget constraints, and that resulted in overspending on employee cost. And when we get to irregular expenditure, we will discuss it again. It's about 3.7 billion rands, and then more than 1/3 of the DOD's next 3 years budget is already committed to pay for obligations. There's also a disclosure note in the financial statements where the departments have to disclose what is their future commitments for the future years based on contracts that have been signed now. So this is also a very important indicator that it will just become more and more difficult for the Department of Defence to operate in terms of the available funds, and that at some point might even have difficulty in paying accounts when they are due. In the middle block, if we look at claims against the Department of Military Veterans and accruals, that also is a significant portion of the next year's budgets, 63% and 47%. So it also indicates the Department of Military Veterans might also experience significant challenges in the future. Armscor financial position was assessed to be good at financial year end, and it is important that they maintain their financial health. I would just like to indicate again in the left-hand corner that if one looks at claims against the state, then 43% of the next year's budget, excluding compensation of employees, that is what it will take to pay all those claims if all those claims would realize in 1 year. So it normally doesn't realize in 1 year, but it's still an important liability to manage because that could have a significant impact on the budget and the cash reserves of the various entities. I'm then going to slide 21, which deals with compliance with legislation. Again, CCB has got no findings because CCB has got a clean audit, and we will note that there was non-compliance by DOD, DMV, and Armscor, and we've indicated there in which specific areas those non-compliances were. Important to note that consequence management is applicable to DOD and DMV. And then going to slide 22, which deals with procurement and payments. Again, there were some findings for DOD, and it relates to uncompetitive and unfair procurement processes, prohibited awards to employees, prohibited awards to family members and partners of employees, and limitations on the audits on awards that we selected for testing. So in the bottom left corner, we've noted 190 million rands of limitations that we had for which we could not get the documentation during the audit process. I now move on to irregular expenditure on slide 23. There is a increase in irregular expenditure. Yeah, irregular expenditure for the year is 4.822 billion. I would just like to emphasize again that in the case of DOD, there's a qualification on the completeness of the irregular expenditure. What we've done is we've then categorized the irregular expenditure into 5 categories. And these 5 categories basically relates to the 5 pillars of procurement, and it focuses on whether it was done in an equitable way, in a fair way, cost-effective way, transparent way, and whether there was competitiveness. And then we've highlighted under the various headings. So for DOD, 430 million rand was done in an uncompetitive way, and that includes, for instance, the procurement that was done under projects Tusano and the procurement for the Hebron. Those irregular expenditure were only accounted for in this financial year. Then there's 273 million rands where it was not done in an equitable manner. And then for DMV, 30.3 million rands, which was not cost effective, and that relates to, amongst others, 7 million rand included as part of irregular expenditure that could have been avoided had due diligence been performed for approving the emergency housing for military veterans. Then if you look at the other category, it's there that we find the compensation for employees, and apologies, I think I said 3.7 earlier on. It's 2.7 billion rands that cost of employees were exceeded with in terms of the budget. There's however no direct link with the wastage of resources, but it's important to note that this 2.7 million rand gets funded from other areas, either shifting of funds or savings, and that could negatively impact other service delivery areas in the department. In the case of DMV, there was a 7.8 million rands under compensation of employees, and in this case, it was an employee that was appointed in a position to the DMV, but there's no relevant position on the establishment of the Department of Monetary Accounts. Moving on to slide 24. Slide 24 focuses then on consequence management, and on top it just gives us an indication of the total value of irregular expenditure that's currently disclosed in the financial statements of all these entities, and you will note that it increased from 5.2 billion to 15.3 billion, nearly threefold. Important to highlight here is if we look at the middle on how auditors dealt with the irregular expenditure, and we would note that basically the majority of this irregular expenditure have not been dealt with. And that is because there's delays in implementing and starting and completing investigations into irregular expenditure, and a lack of effective consequence management and disciplinary action taken for irregular expenditure. And you will recall that I've highlighted when I discussed the accountability ecosystem that taking that action is one of the key responsibility of certain role players. Chairperson, slide 26, we focus on the overall root causes for all these findings that we've discussed throughout this session, and it relates to slow implementation of action plans to address audit findings in the environment of the DOD and the DMV. And then in the case of Armscor has got some deficiencies in its IT systems, and that specifically relates to the IT systems that are used for financial reporting. And it is because of those IT systems and the way that they currently function that Armscor has got difficulty to compile accurate and complete financial statements. So there's some focus needed on improving the financial systems. And then consequence management was not adequately implemented for poor performance in DOD and DMV. If you look at the recommendations and the commitments by the accounting officer and accounting authorities, then we are recommending that the accounting officers or the boards, with the support of the audit committee, should monitor the implementation of the audit action plan. So every year, the entities after the audit cycle develop an audit action plan with target dates, and it's very important that those action plans are effectively implemented throughout the year, and that is monitored. If that is not done, then the audit outcomes will not change. The accounting officer should conduct proper and timely investigations into all cases of fruitless and wasteful and irregular expenditure, and officials should be held liable. And once investigations are done, disciplinary actions should be taken. Now, this also is very important for material irregularities, because as I've indicated earlier on, in most cases with the material irregularities, the investigations were either not done or are in progress, or sometimes the conclusion is not a proper conclusion in terms of holding individuals accountable. In terms of commitments, we did obtain commitments from the Secretary of Defense. She committed to reduce the procurement sentence to ensure that they are manageable, and continue engagement with the Executive Authority and the Chief of the ASTNDF for implementing consequence management. The accounting officer of the DMV will formulate a turnaround strategy in the form of an action plan to ensure improvement in audit outcomes, and the legal unit will be capacitated to assist in addressing the issues of consequence management. And then in the case of Armscor, the CEO will review the supply chain management structures and provide training on sole and single sourcing, and ensure that internal audit is adequately capacitated. We also received commitments from the Minister during engagements with the Minister, and those are that instructions regarding the implementation of consequence management were issued to the accounting officer and the chief of the SANDF, and this includes specific instruction to the chief of the SANDF regarding the airborne material irregularity. And the contract for project Tusana will be reviewed by the independent legal unit to ensure that the DOG mutually benefits from it. Moving on to the last slide, and on the left-hand side, we are reflecting on the recommendations that we've made to the portfolio committee in the past. And at the bottom, we have a reflection, and our reflection is that the portfolio committee actually did exercise its oversight responsibility throughout the year by calling the executive authority and accounting authorities to account to the committee. There was a focus on all the key areas that we've highlighted in the audit process. The committee focused on the implementation of audit action plans. It is a matter of that these plans were not successfully implemented, but the committee did exercise its oversight. We then on the right-hand side just have a few key messages that we would like the portfolio committee with. We suggest that the committee again obtain and track the commitments from the accounting officers for the implementation of action plans to ensure the improvement of the audit outcomes. That the portfolio committee should continue to actively engage with all role players within the accountability ecosystem to ensure that appropriate measures are taken to resolve the issues of consequence management and to ensure that action are taken against the relevant officials. And then that the committee should request regular feedback on the finalizing of long outstanding cases of consequence management. The portfolio committee should monitor the accountability ecosystem to ensure that all role players, assurance providers effectively exercise their roles to improve the audit outcomes. And then lastly, that the portfolio committee should assess the departments and public entities' strategic and annual performance plans to ensure that the committee effectively exercise its oversight role. And what we think is important is that, and that's why we've included information this year, detail on the performance information, in that would assist the committee in reflecting on the progress in terms of the MTSF targets, reflecting in terms of targets that are not achieved on an annual basis, reflect on what actions are taken by the entities to catch up and to ensure that the actual targets are achieved, reflect on the funds that are actually spent and compare that with the actual delivery on the ground, and then reflect on if there's any changes needed to the annual performance plans for the future. Then lastly, Chairperson, we've about 3 years ago, we've issued comprehensive documents on preventative controls. We have discussed it with the committee, and we would just like to remind the committee that those documents are still available, containing the details of preventative controls, and that preventative controls can assist the committee in its oversight role if you focus on those controls in your engagement with the various entities. Thank you, Chairperson. I will hand over for any questions or comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Van Vieren. What is interesting is the last slide that details what is expected of the portfolio committee, and that the AG is now, in a way, auditing the performance of the committee. I think we welcome that. As you said, we are now part of the accountability ecosystem. It's a story of who judged the judges. Who judges the judges? So it's that circle that says we are also accountable on our own performance as a committee. Very interesting, powerful. I'm sure if all the accounting officers were to take note of that when we call for higher levels of accountability, it's because we are also accountable as the portfolio committee to Parliament and to the AG. And the AG office is also accountable to Parliament as well. So it's that cycle that keeps us together as a committee for maximum returns to the electorate. Now, having listened to this presentation, colleagues, I can only allow questions for clarity questions, because we're not debating it. We don't debate the AG's report. And once we are done with the questions and the AG has responded to those questions, the minister will just give us her closing remarks. And I hope she too will not touch on the merits of the issue, but just to say I've listened to the presentation, and that when we meet next, they'll be ready to respond to all the matters detailed in the presentation by the AG. And let me just sequence issues a bit before I welcome the hands. On the day that the departments will be coming to present on their annual reports, we expect them to come with their own audit committees. And there must be a confirmation that the audit committees have been invited, because there's a section in the report that cannot be presented by the AG nor the accounting officer, but only the internal audit committee. So we want them to be in the meeting, just because they have a responsibility as well to monitor the implementation of the audit action plans, and because they are also part of this value chain to improve the audit outcomes and of the departments. And so it's a question of all of us, every member of the ecosystem doing his or her bit and accounting, and we are at the forum to press for that accountability. Now, I should note for the SecDef that SecDef, your audit committee is supposed to be 6, but you only have 3 members now. So you may have a problem with the quorum. One member is deceased. May his soul rest in peace. The other 2 members' contract ended. So I left with 3. Please correct that so that that does not become a problem when we meet with you in the next term. DMV, you had a challenge with your audit committee. please correct that if you have not corrected it, so that you don't have a challenge when we meet with your audit committee in the next quarter. And I'm just warning the two departments. CCB, I don't even think we should call you because you have a clean report, but we'll call you just to brag for 10 minutes and we pass to the next item. And then we'll then focus on the areas. I don't think we'll spend much time with Armscor as well because there are fewer areas of qualification. They're not that material. And again, that's the reason why these two entities, on the day when they're invited, we place them as first items on the agenda. I thought I should just indicate that. For hands, I recognized Mr. Murray. Mr. Murray?
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you also to Mr. Van Vieren for his presentation. I just want to, as you said, a couple of questions for clarity. My first one is just on slide number 8, where you've indicated the refund from the United Nations, that it is UN fund is reliant on the contributions of donor countries. Can you just confirm? My understanding is, and that's the information that has been communicated to us regularly, that's not quite all that it depends on. It depends on the serviceability of our own equipment. Now, that seems to be not featuring in your report. And I mean, that's a well-known fact on the what basis the UN is funding. And that seems to be a bit confusing to me. Then secondly, I want to know whether the One Military Ramp project was part of your audit investigation, and whether there was nothing then found, because we know that we have been inundated with that project and the problems and irregularities and even National Prosecuting Authority involvement there. So why is that not featuring? Then also you have indicated a further meeting with the committee based on this report. Can you tell us at this stage, what will that be about and when will that be, just in terms of that timeline? Then one of your biggest issues that you have raised is the no appropriate action and no consequences. It is obviously very frustrating, I think, for us, and you will recognize that I come from the previous parliament, and many of these things has been repetitive over years. But never have we seen any action or even referring of by the Auditor-General to prosecuting authorities, or any action basically taken against anybody. And I can quote from a ministerial response to a question of mine that no actions have been taken and nobody has been held accountable in terms of disciplinary. Where does it leave us and where does it leave you if there are continuously no consequences? I know you've set out in terms of action steps that can be taken, but what are the timelines before real action is taken? Because I get frustrated, and I think many of people out there get frustrated that it seems like there's always water under the bridge, and irrespective of the words and irrespective of the audit report and the findings and the recommendations, there seems to be no follow-up. It's words, and more words, but little action at all. Then I just wanted to find out a bit about Project Tusano findings. Your problem and your material irregularities that you have found, and your basically problems with this project. Is it with both of these two contracts, because you, in terms of your findings that you are giving us, it seems like it is the whole contract. In other words, both of those two main contracts. The reason I'm asking that is that there was also a bit of a contradictory responses to written questions of mine, which I can give you the details, which indicates that your problem is not with Tusano. It's only with one subcontract. In other words, basically the Cuban medicine. That's your only problem and nothing with the rest. So is that the case, or is it with all of Tusano, as I am interpreting your previous presentations, as well as the one from today? And when there are clear violations of the PFMA, even the Constitution that you have mentioned in previous presentations, and National Treasury regulations, what should be done with contracts like that? Because in terms of also responses that I've received, up till the end of this contract term, there will be a further 2.6 billion rand being spent, and that means that 2.6 billion rand might also be irregular and immaterial and material irregularity, and then wasteful expenditure. So where does that leave us going forward? And then specifically also with regards to consequences around Tusano. You know, what, as I've said, what does it mean reassessed? What does it mean reviewed? And how can we take this forward and making sure that that you've given us, and you must guide us maybe on that as well. And that's slide 220, where you have said that basically 1/3 of the future payments will go for expenditures of the past. Is that a healthy concern or a practice? Because as I read it, we are paying, you know, things that has happened with future money, and we are knowing with a decreasing budget, this is going to catch us somewhere, and then we will have nothing to pay for future commitments. And we know that with a defense force, you have to have at least a medium-term framework that you can act upon, and sometimes even for longer than that, in terms of the capital equipment and the nature of that we have got, and the commitments that we must make. So if you can respond to those, I'll appreciate that very much. If there's anything that I feel that has not been addressed, maybe I can come in later. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mabe. Honorable Motley. Please unmute, sir. Honorable Motley. Honorable Motley, please unmute. Okay.
No, sorry, Chair. I think Honorable Mare has covered land. I will only ask one question to the AG around this recurring irregular amounts. What do you think the department should do to deal with that matter? Because if nothing is done, in my own understanding, these irregular amounts will continue to recur year in, year out. What do you suggest they should do to get them off their back in order to assist the process so that going forward, some of these irregularities that happens in the past are off their book. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Can you go to slide 25? I just want to be clear if Honorable Thabo is asking whether, in addition to what is being projected, there is more that can be done. Just go to slide 25, please. I'm asking that we focus on this one a bit because Thabo is right. The last 4 financial years, this thing has escalated from 5.2 billion to 15.36 billion.
Are you not referring to slide number 24?
It's okay. Let's slide number 24. Can you just open? Please, can you flood the slide, please? And again, is for those disclosed, the irregular expenditure disclosed, but the information that there is more that is not disclosed. Is 24, please? This is the one, yes, slide number 24. You see, I think reason for, just the corner there, reasons for irregular expenditure not dealt with. One is delays in completing investigations into irregular expenditure, and 2, lack of effective consequence management to ensure that for finalized investigations, disciplinary action taken posting, that unless they act on these, they'll continue to post the irregular expenditure. And that 2, the issue is that so if is that they will not then be able to regularize the expenditure. If anything, it will keep going up. And as the audit outcomes continue to worsen in the department. All right. So I'm saying that this is what was in the thing. Maybe you'll get additional information. Is there any other hand, colleagues? All right. AG.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I'll start off with the one which you just addressed in terms of slide 24. So your assessment is spot on. This irregular expenditure can only be removed from the books once all the actions have been taken as required by the PFMA. So the investigations must take place, individuals must be held accountable, and only then can the irregular expenditure then be removed. In some cases, it can be condoned. In other cases, once all the investigations has been done and all the actions has been taken, an accounting officer does have the opportunity to then remove the irregular expenditure, but it can only be done once the consequence management in investigations has taken place. I'm going to start off with the other questions. So with regard to the UN contract, it's important for me just to emphasize again, the information as articulated in that slide is exactly taken from the performance information of the department. So we've taken it from as it is in the annual report. So it's not the AG's words there. However, yes, there are serviceability could have an impact on the ultimate income on that project. But there could be other factors as well. With regard to the ramp project, so that project was thoroughly investigated by forensic auditors. and they've made certain recommendations. Some of them even relates to criminal action. So it's important that those actions must just be taken. It's part of what we report under consequence management. So the consequence management, there's various transactions that consequence management must take place. So it's part of that. So that processes in terms of those recommendations of that contract must still go ahead. You will also recall that there are other role players also involved. Department of Public Works is for instance, also involved. So what we will do is during the audit process, we will every year follow up and see to what extent those recommendations have been implemented. There are some fruitless and wasteful expenditure that also emanated from that project, and we are following up on that to ensure that it is included in fruitless and wasteful expenditure. Some of it relates to medical equipment that is included in the financial statements. Further meeting with the committee, yes, Chairperson, I cannot give a specific date, but it is also important for us to engage with the committee as soon as possible. We will engage with the committee as soon as we've got all the information to have a discussion with the committee around this matter. About the consequence management, so that is why we highlight the consequence management in the audit report and in this presentation. It is critical that the consequence management must take place. But it is the responsibility of the various role players to take that consequence management. So in the various environments, it's the accounting officer's responsibility to make sure that that consequence management is indeed taken. And we will keep on reporting on that consequence management not being taken place, because it is a requirement of the legislation that those consequence management must take place. On Project Tusano, so if we go to that slide on Project Tusano, we actually indicate there that the total cost of the project. So the total cost of the project is considered to be irregular expenditure. It is not just the Hebron part. It is because for the repair of the military vehicles, as well as for the procurement of the Hebron, there was no supply chain management process followed in terms of Section 217 of the Constitution. That's why that all the expenditure relating to Project Tusano is regarded as irregular expenditure. Yes, it's true that all the expenditure that will still be incurred on that project will therefore automatically become irregular expenditure. If you look at the recommendations that we've made to the accounting officer, we've indicated that the accounting officer should look into this contract and determine other appropriate ways to deal with this need to repair the vehicles. And to evaluate the contract and ensure that the contract is to mutual benefit of the DoD. It is also very important then to note that, as we've indicated, some of these supplements are open-ended. So it's very important to make sure that the department works towards a situation where the supplements have got a definite end date, and where it is linked to rand value amounts in terms of how much can be spent in terms of those contracts. So to make sure that it is not open-ended. The 1/3 of the budget, yes. So and that's why we highlight it. As I've indicated, it's ideal for a department to spend the allocation for the year in that financial year. However, it is not practically possible because one will always have those invoices that were received close to year end that you will only pay from the next year's allocation. But it should be limited to that It should not be a matter that grows over a number of years to the extent that you will actually have to use 1/3 of your new budget to pay your expenditure of the previous year, and that is what can put departments in a very difficult financial position if you have to use 1/3 of your budget to pay for achievements of the previous year, and then you actually take those funds away or you don't have those funds available for your performance for this year, because your APP, your underperformance plan, is linked to the budget. And the moment that 1/3 of your budget must be utilized to pay prior year expenditure, it then significant impact on your availability of your financial means to enable you to execute your current year's annual performance plan and to meet those targets. I think the other question with regard to irregular expenditure is also what should be done to prevent it, and it's critical first of all that there's preventative controls that should be put in place. The various entities should, from the audit report and the audit, they will have to compile the audit action plans. They should investigate which controls have failed and why did those controls fail, and then they need to take appropriate action. If a control was deliberately circumvented, then it's a matter of disciplinary action that needs to be taken. If it's a control that's not in place, then that control should immediately be put in place and be monitored. And very important here is the role of internal audit. So in these environments where there is significant irregular expenditure, it is critical that internal audit should throughout the year audit the procurement processes to test those controls and to make sure that they are effective. That is the only way that irregular expenditure will be limited for the future. And again, consequence management is very important to ensure that there's not a situation where there's repeat transgressions by individual officials. Chairperson, I trust that I've responded to all the questions. I can be reminded if there's anyone that I missed. Thank you.
Chairperson, the only one that is not responded to is basically the timelines. And my apologies if I refer back to slide 13 and 14. There, especially in that last one, 4, it gives it tells us what the Auditor-General will do, that there's even requests, and but what if that doesn't happen? So what is the timelines that there will be action taken by the Auditor-General, or that we are obliged to take action? Because all that we see now is an extension and a delay, an extension and a delay, and nobody is acting. Neither the accounting officer, the minister, AXA, ourselves, NPA, nobody is acting because nobody forces this through. So what are you doing about that? And what must we do? Not should, but must everybody do in this regard? This is a bit of a thing that hangs in the air. Thank you.
AG? Mr. Van Vuren, the question is very clear.
Sorry, Chairperson, I just lost connection here. Can you hear me, Chairperson?
Well, look, the question, if I...
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. No, thank you, Chairperson. I don't know what's happening here on my screen. So, Chairperson, yes, the timelines is important. So in terms of the material irregularity process, we are aware that some of these material irregularities is there now for a long time. So that is why on our side we are looking at avenues to deal with this. In the case of the Department of Defense, there's a uniqueness around the Defense Act. and the way that it's implemented, and also then the PFMA, and that is why I've indicated we would like to have a separate meeting with the committee to discuss the way the way forward on that. Again, as we've recommended throughout the presentation, it is still important that all role players does focus on appropriate action being taken. So there's still nothing at this point in time that prevents any role player from taking action. The Secretary of Defence can take action against civilian members under her command. The Chief of the SANDF can take action against military officials under his command. So there's nothing preventing the action being taken at this point in time. The difficulty is that the Secretary of Defence does not have the power to take action against military members, but it does not prevent the Secretary of Defence to take action against civilian members. So that should go ahead. Thank you, Chairperson.
Yeah, I mean, if this problem of a duality of accounting authority in the department creates some challenges. What I can deduce from the statement is that it means that when we passed the law, this situation was not anticipated, and that if it is not resolved by amending the law, I don't think there's any other way of dealing with it, because you will determine that there is a material irregularity. But the key question at the end of the day, if there is no movement or action on it, is who do you take who do you attribute the
hold accountable? Yeah.
Who do you hold accountable in the ultimate analysis? Because what I take from your presentation is that the situation in DOD is different from the situation in other departments where the accounting authority vests with the DG of the department. Yes, even in our situation, it's still versed with the SecDef. And but there again, the Defence Act poses some limitation as to what the SecDef can do and cannot do. And in other words, she can't enforce to apply consequence management in that environment, in the uniform environment. She may recommend, and but the final decision rests with the chief. We're raising this point because it's starting to become a challenge when the chief doesn't act. You have reported in your report, you have mentioned in your report that where the chief was expected to apply consequence management, we cite cases where that ought to have happened and that never happened and is in the report. You also mention instances where the SecDef was expected to apply consequence management, but that never happened. You see, you in this case, you're never too sure whether it's the limitation placed on the SecDef by the Defence Act, or there is simple unwillingness to act. Hiding behind this dual accounting authority, in inverted commas. So that is the problem. The SecDef would say on matters where are not within her realm, within her competency, in the competence of the SecDef. No, I've escalated the matter to the minister. The minister will come and say, well, I've instructed the chief to act. But the reality is that there are no outcomes. So it cannot end at the statement. We've called the chief to act. And precisely because the accountability rests at at those levels. I mean, even if the minister had all the will to do anything, but she can't also penetrate the environment and the uniform environment. I'm saying that's the situation we are presented with. It is in that context, colleagues, that we said before, when we called for the first time the Chief General Shogo to come and account, that where there is responsibility, there's accountability. You can't run away from it. You see, those are two sides of the same coin. You have a responsibility, and therefore you are accountable on the responsibility allocated to you. And you can't hide behind any other thing. You know, you bear accountability. Because you have a responsibility, you bear accountability on the thing, on the responsibilities allocated to you. It is in that context that we're able to penetrate this thing. It's true that at the time when we took the decision, there was some, people felt, I mean, that never happened, and it's the first time. But we said no, it can't be said it's the first time, because we're looking where the responsibility is placed. Now, but of course, we will leave that to the minister to untangle. And it's a challenge. The minister is in the meeting. He's listening to this problem, and but only her can assist to try and untangle it. We can call for the department to act, but we can take the horse to the water, and we can't force the horse to drink the water. That's where Mr. Mare's question comes in. And what do we do? Then you say there's material irregularity, process, but itself has its own challenges that it cannot be taken to its logical conclusion. Then we're back to square one. That's the challenge. Okay, I'll leave it at that. I think I've unpacked it. Colleagues, we can't take it beyond this. The purpose of the meeting was to receive the briefing, and we've done just that. And we should thank the AG for presenting to us. And I promise that the minister will be given the platform and to say a few words. And as the political head of the department under all these entities result. Honorable Minister, over to you, ma'am. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I do understand that we are worried about consequence management. I am too. But the truth of the matter is that the powers conferred onto the secretary actually enables the secretary to be very elaborate in the instructions to the Chief of the Defense as to what and who it should happen. And therefore, I think it is a route that is very less traveled, because I have not seen copies of where there are specific instructions from SecDef to the Chief of the Defense for saying here and here and here and here. And this is what we expect within. And that is why I have taken this unprecedented decision of saying to SecDef, why don't I give you a deadline that says within 2 weeks, you must tell me what you are doing to ensure that the log division behaves accordingly. I know that directly she would have to go through the chief. Let's go to that route before we panic and we say that we do need to go and amend the act. Because I think we have actually not done what should be done. I think what is happening is that sometimes when we are in the different responsibility positions, we nurse each other too much. And sometimes there is a belief that everything in the uniform, before any action can be taken, there must be a board of inquiry. I don't think so. I don't think in matters which have anything to do with financial delinquents, misconduct, or pure maladministration, we should be going. If it is like that, it is like that. There are instances where, in fact, we do need a board of inquiry. But when things are quite clear, which is here, there has not been things that should be done, then we must act. But otherwise, I want to align myself with the sentiments expressed that we do need to pull up our socks and do what needs to be done, and to thank the AG for continuously saying what needs to be said without beating around the bush. Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. Okay, I think we'll leave it with that, and then at least you have identified the problem. We hope that it's going to be taken to heart, so that we don't move in circle. We're able to deal with these issues and put them behind us. It remains for me to thank you, Minister, DM, and all the CEOs and the teams, and also the Office of the AG. We remain indebted to you. You are a tool in the hand of the legislature. We will continue to use the tool to deepen oversight, and because we know that if we do so, the benefits to the electorate will be improved, will increase, and will increase where the money is spent correctly, and the money, there is no under expenditure, and there are necessary control environment in our situation, because more money will become available for service delivery. Thank you very much, colleagues. But we have the last item to deal with. I think it's the minutes and to adopt and consider and adopt. Thank you very much, colleagues. You may disengage if you want to, but we'll deal with this and then close. Brian, may I invite you to take us to the last item? Please beam the minutes. Right, can you enlarge the screen? Brian, is the problem with me? Please enlarge the screen. Is it enlarged?
Yes, it is, Chair.
Oh, it means that the problem is this side. Okay.
Yeah, it's enlarged on my side as well.
So, okay, that's fine. Okay, deal with it. Colleagues, let's look for corrections. We start with the attendance. We're now on page 2. And then page 3. Page 4. And the last page. Oh, okay. That was not the last page. All right, continue. We're on page 6. And then the last page, page 7. All right, colleagues, these are the minutes. Are there any correction that you want to effect? If none, can we get the mover and the seconder?
Mafanya moves.
Mr. Mafanya moves, seconded.
Seconded, Chair.
Seconded by Honorable Muslim. So, okay, the minutes are duly adopted. Is that the only set, Brian?
We have two more sets, Chair.
Okay, all right. Okay, this is minutes of the 14th of September. Okay, this is the first page. Right, this is attendance. You can move. Second page. Move to the third page. Checking corrections. Fourth page. All right. Continue. Continue. Okay. Continue. All right. Colleagues, these are the minutes.
Chairperson, I don't have a problem with the minutes, but can I just ask your guidance? There was a letter from the Secretary of Defense regarding this meeting and some information that she was requesting that was forwarded to us, that letter. Obviously, I know that's not part of the minutes, but I just thought it deals with this meeting. How should we deal, or when will we deal with that letter of hers?
Can we adopt the minutes first?
Okay. I so propose.
You propose, seconded by? Can I get a seconder?
Now, I feel nobody wants to second my proposal.
I don't know. Can I get a second, colleagues?
Mafanya seconds.
Mafanya seconds. Thank you very much. Right. There's an issue. There's an issue that Mr. Murray has raised of the letter from the SecDef. I've asked Brian to circulate it to all the members because it was requiring details of the author who they want to communicate directly with and get more information from him, including taking statements that can be used in the departmental inquiry, or BOI. And my response was that was to ask Brian to resubmit all the emails to them, because the details of the people are on those emails, their names, their first numbers, telephone numbers, including their email addresses, for ease of reference. So I did not understand why they came back to us for more information. And I could only suspect that it may be that the information we sent to them earlier did not reach the convening authorities or authority. Hence the request. You recall that the SecDef said they could not remember seeing the thing. We said in this meeting that it was sent for the attention of the HR chief, but all documents we send them via the minister's office. The PLO confirmed receiving the first correspondence and indicated that it was sent to the chief HR. The chief HR was not in the meeting, so it may therefore create that gap. But with the resubmission of the information, I think it will close the gap. You want to say more, Mr. Murray, on this?
No, sir. I don't think it's needed, but I think it's just an obvious invitation. I'm not quite sure about the names that you have sent through. I just want to, make sure that if there are any names that we feel that can contribute to that, whether we should then send that to either Brian or directly to the Secretary of Defense. Maybe they are part of the list. I don't know. The names that has been sent through. So, okay.
No,
in other words, if we have got information that we feel that can contribute or not. Thank you.
No, I think what we should do, maybe it's our omission, Mr. Murray, is that we must circulate the emails as well, so that you audit whether the information we have is the same information you have. But obviously, as the chair and the committee, we were acting on the information that was sent to us directly and by the complainants. So, Brian, please circulate all the information that we received to the thing. I know we circulated the names and some information, and not all the information. Is that correct, Brian?
That is correct. There is some information that we circulated, but I will just create a folder of everything and send to members.
Please do. Please don't, colleagues, don't think we were hiding this information away from you. We never thought it would develop into this. We thought it was just information of people doing inquiries, 804 people or 815 people. Some of them have not been paid. And this is the list. This is when they were engaged. This is when they were discharged. And so we thought the department would just come back and say, no, true, not true, not true. And then we leave it at that. But they're not doing that. And I don't know what is stopping them from responding, at least updating us on who was paid and who was not paid, and what were the reasons for them not being paid, getting paid, because that is the the essence of the complaint. Members were not. They delivered, they offered their services, but they have not been remunerated. All right, and can I leave it at that for now, colleagues?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. All right, colleagues, let's leave it at that. Brian, are we done with the minutes? Maybe there's a last set.
The last set, Chair.
Okay. Right, the last set, colleagues, this is the deal with the attendance, the record, page 2, page 3, and okay, so then the last page. Any corrections? If none, can we take them as the true record of what transpired at the meeting? Can I get a mover and a seconder? Ms. Matapo moves. Is that correct, Ms. Matapo?
Yes.
All right, it's correct. And then seconded by? Don't get the name. I don't get the name. Seconded by? Colleagues, can we approve the record? Okay.
Seconded, sir. Seconded.
No, thank you very much. The minutes are seconded. All right, colleagues, thank you very much for your attendance. We can then leave it at that for now and call it a day. Thank you so much for attendance.
Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Recording stopped.